بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. My name is Vinay Katia, and I embraced Islam about 13 years ago, roughly, give or take a year, I don't remember exactly. I embraced Islam from Hinduism, and I became a Shia Muslim about a year after embracing Islam. And then I went on to make the study of Islam and Islamic history and Ahlul Bayt not only my profession, but my entire life. So it's both my hobby, profession, and faith. The beginning of my journey really was focused on two things. It was on the oneness of God, monotheism, and prophethood. And that's really what I focused on in the beginning when studying about Islam. And I think I came across here and there about the Prophet's companions and about his family, but I didn't really focus on that. I mean, the two things that I was really focusing on before becoming a Muslim was monotheism, the oneness of God, and the beliefs related to that, and the prophethood of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and his family. And that was really my focus. And then as soon as I became Muslim, now all these alternative readings of history or different opinions or ideas were presented to me by those around me first. And then that kind of began a really long journey. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine who was my neighbor who I went to school with, when he found out I became Muslim, he came up to me and he said, my dad's a Maulana, do you want to come over? I'm like, I don't know what a Maulana is, but it sounds interesting. He probably knows a lot about the religion. So he says, do you want to come over? And lo and behold, that was actually Dr. Liaquat Takim at that time. This was in 2002, and during the winter. So he introduced me to Dr. Takim, who incidentally is my doctoral supervisor now, so many years later supervising my doctoral dissertation. May God give him a long life. And he actually introduced me to these issues. He took me down into his library and he kind of said, do you know anything about the Ahlul Bayt? Do you know anything about the path of the Ahlul Bayt? You don't have to decide anything, but it's good to know. And then he gave me a book called Al-Muraja'at, by Sayyid Abdul Sharafuddin al-Musawi, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. And he gave me this book and he said, this book might interest you. And he gave me a bunch of other books as well. And I started reading them, and then I started discovering, oh wow, there's a lot of controversy after the death of the Prophet, after his passing. And where do I stand now? What determination do I make about all these different events that happened after the death of the Prophet? Karbala came a little bit later, actually. Karbala was not on my map yet. The first thing that was on my map was the succession to the Prophet himself. And the incidents that occurred around his daughter, Sayyid Zahra, salawatullahi wa salamu alayha. Well, my first exposure to Muharram and Azadari was when I was invited to a majlis in Toronto, to a series of majalis for the 10 nights. And I used to come every night and listen to the lecture, and I was pretty amazed. I mean, really, I was kind of taken aback at how emotional everyone was. I mean, I was totally new to this religion. I mean, this was the first time, and it was like, I became Muslim, and then Muharram came slightly after. So I was kind of just transitioned right into Muharram. And at first it was a little bit surprising, to see everyone beating their chest and to look at, to see everyone crying and wearing black. And I wasn't entirely sure what to do at first. One day I was, in my room, and I picked up the translation of Tabari, of the history of Tabari by I.K. Howard. It's on the Khilafah of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And in there I decided to open it and start reading some of the pages about Karbala. The narrative of Karbala is narrated by Abu Mikhdaf. And I just broke down in tears. As I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, this is shocking. This is a grandson of the Prophet. This is, you know, one of the most distinguished people in the history of Islam, and he's being slaughtered like an animal. I mean, I was more speechless. I didn't really, to be honest, I didn't really talk to them too much. They were more worried about me being a Muslim, leave aside Shia. You know, I don't think that was on their radar really at all. They were more worried about issues of, you know, of post 9/11, all of that. You know, they're more worried about the issues revolving around post 9/11 than Muharram. But later on, definitely later on in life, you know, as I, you know, developed, you know, in my own understanding of the tragedy of Karbala, and then, you know, attended the Hawza many years late, you know, for a while, and then I started talking to them more about it, and then they started listening to my lectures on YouTube, and now they like send it to their other friends, and they watch it, and they're pretty struck by it. And being from Africa and India, and they've been exposed to this before, so it wasn't a shock to them really. It wasn't a shock. I mean, for example, one of my uncles told me in the city of Kanpur, I think it's a city in North India, he said that he used to join the julus, he used to join the walk, and you know, he would see people beating their chest and hitting themselves with chains, and he said that in India it was very normal. It was very, you know, being exposed to that. So perhaps that's a benefit of my, you know, of my South Asian background, that my parents were kind of more, you know, already exposed to. They knew what Muharram was. You know, being from East Africa, although they're Hindus, they knew what Muharram was, and they had seen julus, and from being from Dar es Salaam, so it wasn't something which was totally new to them. I think it's a poignant manifestation of our commitment to the path of Ahlul Bayt. And if that can spark some questions in someone's mind, or perhaps cause some kind of soul searching, or some kind of curiosity, you know, to spark curiosity within someone else, and then perhaps they'll learn about Imam Hussein, or learn about the Prophet, or learn about Islam through that, in a positive manner, then it is useful. So I think it is useful, but you know, we need to look at how we go about in setting it up. It's not a matter of culture. It is not a matter of Arab culture, Iranian culture, or whatever you want to call it, or Indian culture. It is a matter of salvation. That salvation of the soul lies in the remembrance of Imam Hussein alayhi salam itself. That the distinction between heaven and hell, and where we will end up as Shias, or as people who subscribe to the school of Ahlul Bayt, is determined by our remembrance of Imam Hussein, by the intensity of our remembrance, by the degree to which it changes our life, the degree to which our akhlaq changes, the degree to which our heart softens. It's so hard to choose one personality aside from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Perhaps Sayyidah Zainab as well, since I lived in her city and, you know, was her guest, and, you know, and inshallah, you know, her servant in her city, you know, while I was studying for some time. Her resolve, you know, the way she refused to be humiliated, the way she spoke when in Kufa, the way she had, despite being a woman, despite being someone who obviously is concerned with her hijab, concerned with her you know, her modesty, and not only her modesty, but everything that she had been through, all the psychological trauma that she had experienced. Despite that, she spoke with so much certainty and power, you know, and she, I mean, basically, you know, she told them that they are going to hell, that they will burn in hell forever. For a lady to tell a group of men that, I mean, it's quite incredible. Although I'm, of course, you know, she's a woman, but I take inspiration from her courage, you know, from her courage to speak, from her eloquence, from the power of her speech, most definitely. I mean, you know, and then living in her city and having that connection and visiting her shrine every day, and you develop that relationship, and you know, we hope that our du'as are accepted, you know, with her intercession, inshallah. And I think one of the ways that people can, that we can maintain a connection to the Ahlul Bayt and develop our spirituality after Muharram is, first of all, by regularly performing the ziyarah of the Ahlul Bayt and Al-Imam Hussein alayhi salam. For example, every day reciting the ziyarah of Imam, Ziyarat al-Warith, or Ziyarat al-Ashura, or Ziyarat al-Nahiya, or Ziyarat Ali Yasin, or all of these incredible jewels which the Ahlul Bayt have left us, are both, testifications, are both like doctrinal lessons, and at the same time they're a way through which we can renew our Pledge of Allegiance. Always having, trying to establish the majlis of Al-Imam Hussein wherever we are, at any time of the year. Muharram is not the only time to remember the Imam and the Ahlul Bayt. To take every occasion of the Ahlul Bayt, whether it be wilada, a birthday or a death anniversary, as a very serious day, as a very important day to remember the Ahlul Bayt. And through all of these occasions and personal remembrance and ziyarah, reciting ziyarah from home, and reading the English and contemplating over it, I think people can, help develop that, to strengthen that relationship throughout the year, and not only during Muharram. And most importantly, I think listening to the lectures carefully, making notes, making a list of things that we want to improve upon, whether it be to do with our, whether it is related to our salah or our akhlaq or whatever it is, our behavior, and taking concrete steps towards improving ourselves throughout the year, and then in anticipation for the next Muharram, if God allows us to live that long. Alhamdulillah, I have had the opportunity to visit Karbala and the shrine cities in Iraq twice on two separate trips, and I mean, how do you even describe? I'll just tell a little story just to kind of put it in perspective. I met one of the great scholars in Najaf, one of the sources of emulation in Najaf. And I asked him, to give me a piece of advice, because it was my first time going for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And he looked at the wall. I mean, he's a very, very great scholar, very incredible man. He looked at the wall and he basically told me in Arabic, how do I answer your question? I mean, what kind of question are you even asking me? Like, where do I begin? How do I answer that question? And he began to cry. And he told me that, remember that when you arrive, whatever it is that whatever hajat, whatever desires you have, they will be granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I ask you and beg you to remember this sinner in your du'as, or this humble person who needs the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And imagine, this is a marja. This is someone who's at the highest level. This is someone who's, who's followed by so many people. And he told me this, and it was one of the most incredible moments. I had not even left for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein yet, And then when I got there, it was, of course, the most incredible experience. You feel like you're born again. You literally feel as if you've been given a new lease on life, a new chance to live again. And that's the karama of the shrine of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. The Imam, peace and blessings be upon him, makes a special dua for the ziyarah of Imam Hussein while in sajda. He says, one of his companions walked in and saw the Imam in sajda, and the Imam was doing sajda, and he said, "Oh Allah, Allahumma ighfir lana, oh Allah, forgive us and forgive the ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam." And he begins to describe their attributes in this, and he says, for example, that they have come here responding to our call. Rahmatan lana, out of mercy. They cry out of mercy for us. That they, he begins to thank them and praise them for what they are doing, because because they have mercy towards us, they are performing this ziyarah. And because of that, he makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect them. Not only to protect them, but to protect the family that they have left behind. And he says basically that these children and women and all those people who go for ziyarah and the family that they leave behind are a trust which he bequeaths to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly. Can you imagine? So the zuwar and their families are a trust, so to speak, in the hands of Allah, metaphorically speaking, of course, in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So what more could people ask for? What more? I mean, I don't think there's something more that someone can ask for. I mean, that while they are doing the ziyarah of Imam and Hussein, they are fulfilling, the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think one of the ways that we can impart the message of Imam and Hussein to our children, to those, younger than us, is by making all of these events not only, an event that's limited to mosque or to the Husainiyah, but the whole house partakes in this event. The whole school partakes in this event. There's a special assembly for the remembrance of Imam and Hussein or of any of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt and Sayyidah Zahra, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'een. And this is one of the ways in which Islam becomes interactive. The remembrance of Ahlul Bayt become interactive for our children. That it's not just about, okay, come to mosque, sit down, listen to the speaker and go home. That's great. That's of course very important. But there needs to, that feeling of sadness and remembrance needs to extend to the home. And if it's, an Islamic school, the school itself. I think that the message of Imam and Hussein just teaches us to promote fair play and justice wherever we are. So if we are not in Pakistan or Bahrain or these unfortunate in these countries in which these tragedies are taking place, and these acts of terrorism are being perpetrated against people just because of their faith, what the least we can do here is is to spread awareness and speak to our MPs and to the people that can perhaps make a difference, and to be conscious of that. And the very least we could do is to hate it in our heart and to dislike it in our heart and to feel sad and to feel affected by what is going on, right? And I think another oppression, another way that we can understand oppression is also through spreading fair play where we are, thinking about issues of economic equality or rather economic inequality and promoting economic equality within our societies, feeding the homeless, blood drives, things like this. And these are all the messages that we can get from Karbala about humanity and being a human being and being a compassionate human being and a loving human being towards people, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, it's regardless in that regard specifically. And those are the ways in which we can try to implement some of the lessons of Karbala, especially living in the West. Imam al-Hussein himself was, of course, a perfect embodiment of divine justice, whether people around him and everyone else working in the society may not be, right? So, but that struggle, the struggle and the effort to bring about, a semblance of divine justice in society is something that can be seen in the lives of Christian saints. It can be seen in other religious traditions. So in drawing comparisons with other religious traditions, I find people it may be a good introduction or segue to the story of Karbala, and then getting into the details and speaking about it. And I find people are very emotionally affected by it. That we can welcome new, people that have embraced Islam and and are trying to come to Muharram lectures and Muharram gatherings, or Muharram-oriented gatherings, is by understanding the fact that they don't understand. Not assuming that when, for example, the alam is being passed around that they should kiss it, or that the taboot, or this is especially in South Asian communities, when the miniature caskets are being passed around, that person should somehow get up and kiss it. They don't know what to do. And first of all, I mean, that's not necessarily something which is necessarily a part of the Sharia or a part of the ahadith. They're more cultural developments, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we should be sensitive to the fact that they don't necessarily understand everything that's going on. So thus we should be kind to them and and compassionate towards them, and not judge them, for example, if they don't do something that everyone else is doing because they're unsure of the situation, and to welcome them and especially Muharram can be a very lonely time for a convert because everyone else knows everyone else is talking to everyone, and you have this one convert sitting in the corner looking at everyone, or everyone's going to weekend events with an alim or Q&A or pizza or, I'm not for celebration, but they stay up late and they have like Q&As and discussions and things like that. We should invite them. We should make them feel like they're a part of a family. right? So if we see someone that we don't know, if we see someone who looks new or seems new, whether they're a convert or not, we should go up to them, welcome them, ask them their name, ask them to sit beside us, have tea with them after the program. And that way they will feel more integrated into the community, and they'll feel a greater emotional attachment towards the community. And I hope that will bring about, inshallah, the pleasure of the Imam of our time. May our souls be, sacrificed for his cause. Learning is for us to learn how to deal with loss, to deal with calamities or with tragedy in life. And for me, one of the most powerful moments, and it is probably for all lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, is how Al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam ended, how he spent the final moments of his own life. Despite being injured, despite, as the traditions say, looking like a porcupine, despite having, so many, dozens of stab wounds, still speaking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, still being, of course, content and in love with his Lord. I think this is one of the most incredible things, that what is the nature of our Islam? What is the nature of our submission to God and to our commitment to the path of Ahlul Bayt? That are we halfway there? Are we somewhat there? What is the nature of our commitment? And our commitment is only, the nature of our commitment or the quality of our commitment only comes alive when we are tested, when we get sick, when we lose a loved one, when we lose a job or income or something like this. It's not to say that we're not sad, but does that adversely affect our faith? Or do we increase in our iman? Do we increase in our yaqeen, as it's described in the story of the Ahzab? These nights are the nights of mourning for the Imam of our time. And whatever we think we are going through or experiencing, the Imam of our time, may our souls be ransomed, under his feet, is experiencing something which is indescribable. Right? And to identify with him and to take our tears and give them as a hadiyah to him in these nights, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that hopefully our Imam is pleased with us during these nights, and to remember that our Imam is with us, that our Imam is mourning with us, and that our Imam is, as it is said, shedding tears of blood. However this is understood. And that we reaffirm in our allegiance and our commitment to the Imam of our time, and we ask that, inshallah, he accepts whatever, little we have to offer during these nights.